Peter B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Wednesday, February 20th, 2019. CNN and the other corporate media outlets are warming up the gaslights because a socialist Democrat, Bernie Sanders, announced he's running for president again. And in $27 chunks, his fans, his base, ponied up $6 million in the first 24 hours. That's impressive, and at least in the money game, it makes him the first candidate to really be declared a front runner. And, of course, the knives come out. Now, first of all, it is impressive to see that Sanders, with its $5.9+ million in the first 24 hours, and Kamala Harris, the California senator, picked up $1.5 million in her first 24 hours. Now, these aren't comparable, really, because Bernie has the advantage of the email list and all of the people who voted for him in 2016. But these are the metrics that we use for worse or for worse. And that's where things stand. The other people, let's see, I have a list here. Amy Klobuchar picked up $1 million in 48 hours after her snowy announcement there on that island in the middle of the Missouri River in Minneapolis. And Elizabeth Warren picked up only $300,000 in her first 24 hours. She, of course, was early to announce back there on December 31st. So, again, those are not critical markers, but it's the best that we have. And our listener, Fred, emailed to point out that CNN has graciously announced a town hall with Bernie Sanders. I don't know where it'll be held, but they've announced that their anchor, Wolf Blitzer, will be the moderator of that town hall. And Fred immediately gets suspicious, and he worries that he might be declared anti-Semitic for pointing out the proven fact that Wolf Blitzer used to be the spokesperson for AIPAC, the American Israel Political Affairs Committee. And Fred speculates, in a not unwarranted way, that Wolf will probably take the occasion to challenge Sanders over Sanders' evolution on the issues of Israel and Palestine. And I criticized him back in 2016 for not really articulating a strong foreign policy and often ducking the issues between Israel and Palestine. And since then, I think he's made a great effort to address the sniper fire that has killed protesters, to address the inequities, and he is not afraid, like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, to stand up to the Israel lobby in this country. But expect an ambush by the wolf against Sanders on that town hall meeting. And also at CNN, the ever-reliable attack dog, Chris Cillizza, he published a list of 5 questions about 5 minutes after Sanders made his announcement on the CBS morning program. His 5 questions, they're not all out of bounds. How will he handle the expectations of being in the top tier? Basically, he makes the case that Sanders had it so easy in 2016. And it's really bullshit. Because, number one, it was tough to take on Hillary Clinton. And if you have any doubts about that, ask Martin O'Malley, the former governor of Maryland. My niece was working on his campaign, and he couldn't get any traction. And he had many of the same kind of moderate positions of Hillary Clinton, maybe a little more to the left. O'Malley articulated his opposition to the death penalty. And he got absolutely nowhere. Oh, yeah, and there was a fourth guy, remember? How quickly we forget. He was the senator from Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee. And he'd been governor of Rhode Island. He had flirted with being an independent. I think he was originally a Republican. And he ran as a Democrat. And he got bupkis. So we quickly forget how Sanders very early surfaced as the clear alternative to Hillary Clinton. And they also claim, will he withstand more scrutiny and more attacks? Well, Sanders was attacked as a socialist repeatedly. And, of course, Hillary Clinton didn't personally attack him much. But she had a whole wave of websites, David Brock's Correct the Record, a lot of allies and surrogates who did that dirty work for her. And so to claim that he didn't get scrutiny, we know he never released his full tax returns. We know that his wife Jane Sanders was embroiled in a dispute there at the Burlington College. And I don't believe that he properly dealt with those issues. But it really didn't get in the way of his candidacy. Those who supported Bernie didn't see those as, fatal flaws. Number 3, asks Chris Saliza, does it matter that he's not really a Democrat? And let me confess that I'm not a Democrat, in case that shocks you. But I just consider this to be such bullshit. Because it's party line Democrats and the always Hillary people who point this out. He's not a Democrat. He's not a Democrat. One of my brothers has used this argument too. And it's just so stupid. Because Hillary Clinton, the vetted Democrat, the lifetime Democrat, she was a fatally flawed candidate. Some of those flaws were self-inflicted, like the email scandal, the Wall Street paid speeches. And others were just part of the package, and some of that wasn't her fault, I'll freely admit. Her association with her husband and his administration is part of the long record that dogs a candidate like Hillary Clinton. And so this claim that he's not a Democrat, he can fix that. There's a new DNC rule that requires you to be a Democrat to get the nomination. And I think at some point Bernie is going to quietly submit and will join the Democratic Party, and that'll finally take away that red herring. Then Saliza, question 4, does he have a second act? Says Sanders won't have the liberal lane to himself in this race like he did in 2016. I just pointed out that he didn't originally have the liberal lane to himself. He drove well enough to get the other people out of that metaphorical lane. And so there is an issue that the other candidates are playing Me Too to $15, to college tuition relief, Medicare for all. And what I hope to see Bernie does to distinguish himself is to be the first to call for cuts to the Pentagon budget. Now, one of the bits of analysis I saw, and I guess it was on the public television news hour last night, is that Sanders has led the charge to actually advocate raising taxes, mostly on the rich. Elizabeth Warren has a Soak the Rich package. A couple of other candidates do too. And so I think that to show some newness and innovation, what we need to see is Bernie Sanders say, I'm not afraid to raise taxes, but I'm also not afraid to cut the Pentagon budget. That's where we'll find the money for Medicare for all, for infrastructure repair, for $15 an hour. And I believe Americans are ready for that. And after Trump just arbitrarily threw extra money at the Pentagon, the Democrats supported it. And now he's going to raid that money to build his wall. Or at least some of it. And so that's where I'd like to see Bernie take his campaign to show that he is different. And then there is the identity politics slur. Does the Democratic Party want a 77-year-old white male as its nominee? Well, Trump is in his 70s. Nancy Pelosi's in her 70s. Dianne Feinstein is over 80. And nobody picks on them. I agree it's an issue because there's so many young people running. But Joe Biden, who shares with Bernie Sanders the top polling numbers of announced or intended Democratic candidates, he's only a year younger than the Byrne. And so let me be clear. I welcome all of the different candidates to the Democratic primary next year. Everybody has the right to run. But we've got Cory Booker, we've got Kamala Harris representing non-whites. We also have Julian Castro from Texas running for president as a Latino, and a whole array of women mostly senators. And frankly, we've got to get over this identity politics bullshit. I see a lot of people on Facebook saying, oh, Bernie, 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 but I want a woman for president. Well, the number one qualification has to be, can they beat Trump? And Bernie Sanders still has appeal outside the Democratic Party, even if he does join it. Because of his independence, because of the positions that he has taken. And he can reach those people who went from Obama to voting for Trump in 2016. Better, I believe, than any of the centrists like Amy Klobuchar, Sherrod Brown. And so I'm prepared to sit back and watch this unfold for an entire year. And next year, at the end of February, I'll reach a conclusion about who I think can best beat Trump. But just picking people because they're pretty and female or female and pretty, that's bullshit. We have to get beyond this idea of breaking a glass ceiling and find the best candidate. I believe that Hillary did break that glass ceiling by being the first woman to run. So can we put that competition aside and focus on what really matters? Also, while we're slamming CNN, they've announced that they've hired a Republican attack dog. Her name is Sarah Isgur, and they've given her the title of political director. Or political editor. Political editor. Now, they quickly added that she's not going to be editing anything, and she's mostly going to be coordinating coverage across TV and digital. But this woman is a Trump loyalist, and she had to pledge her loyalty to get her most recent job at the Justice Department. Before that, she worked for people like Ted Cruz and, where else do I have it here? Anyway, a bunch of the right-wingers. And so this is a troubling development. It seems calculated by CNN to try to split the difference between MSNBC and Fox, and trying to prove that they're fair and in the middle, but their ratings are lower than the other two networks, and I think they have a serious identity crisis. And keep in mind that back in 2016, they hired Corey Lewandowski just weeks after he had left the Trump campaign. CNN is shameless in putting people on those bland and overpopulated panels that make their programming boring. Instead of having, a couple of interesting people talk, they got 6 or 8 or 10. I mean, the split screen just gets monotonous. Anyway, we'll leave CNN's rating fortunes to CNN and, of course, Trump. Surprise decision. Supreme Court today has ruled that the Eighth Amendment actually bars excessive fines, and they're going to put limits on what has been going on for decades, starting with the war on some drugs, the abuse of civil asset forfeiture. And in many cases, the people who have had cash seized, who've had cars seized, who've had other property taken by law enforcement, were not convicted of a crime, and they never got their property back. It was theft by the state. Now, the Supreme Court had a case before it where a guy had his Range Rover impounded, taken by government. It was worth $42,000, and the crime he committed, a small amount of heroin, was about $1,200. Here it is. He sold $225 worth of heroin to an undercover cop. He was ordered to pay $1,200 in fees and fines. And so for them to collect a $42,000 vehicle over $1,200 in fines was over the line. Justice Ginsburg, back on the court, RBG says that the vehicle was worth more than 4 times the maximum monetary fine assessable against him for his drug conviction. And this came out of Indiana, where the trial judge objected to the excessive grab by the state officials. And it's interesting because, get this, Clarence Thomas and I agree on something. In a 2017 opinion, he wrote, "This system where police can seize property with limited judicial oversight and retain it for their own use has led to egregious and well-chronicled abuses. The silent justice actually wrote something that I agree with. Interesting story at Scrappy Mint Press News today under the byline of Whitney Webb and Vanessa Beeley. Vanessa Beeley is, I believe, Canadian, and she and a colleague have been covering the war in Syria for several years now, and they exposed the role of the white helmets, not as first aid deliverers, but as provocateurs, deeply involved in the civil war in Syria. And their story opens this way. Over the past few days, notable journalists and other figures in mainstream media have acknowledged that the alleged chemical weapons attack that occurred last April in the Damascus suburb of Douma was likely staged by activist groups like the White Helmets. Their comments and investigations have largely vindicated the many journalists and academics who cast aspersions on the precipitous Western media campaign. And now that we know that those events were staged for the cameras, we know that the retaliatory airstrike taken by the United States was based on a false premise. And you can't call back those bombs. The story indicates that, for example, a picture that went viral of 2 toddlers who were allegedly poisoned by this release of sarin or some other nerve agent in Douma. Well, there were pictures taken before the photo of the 2 of them that showed them each in different locations. And so it's clear that the children who had been photographed on separate floors in the building before being artfully arranged into the last hug by the producers of the scene, that was staged. And there's other information, too, showing how a British reporter named Dalati, I don't have his first name handy here, but he had originally attacked as conspiracy theory those of us who raise questions about the reporting and the legitimacy of the claim. And one of the real indicators to me is that the first responders, whether you want to call them white helmets or anybody else, that they didn't have any protective gear as they approached these victims who they claimed had been exposed to a nerve agent. Pink Floyd co-founder Roger Waters is standing on the right side of issues again, and he has attacked the billionaire Brit Richard Branson, who is staging a benefit concert for so-called humanitarian aid for Venezuela this coming Friday. And they hope to raise about $100 million to provide food and medicine for Venezuelans who are suffering the widespread shortages. Now, as you know, the use of humanitarian aid as a weapon to bring down the Maduro government is the obvious ploy here. Apparently, Branson can't see that, and he's willing to be a tool for the regime change supporters who have lined up behind Guaido, who is the rump guy who is claiming to be the president of Venezuela. And I consider this to be a Trojan horse effort designed to divide the military from supporting Maduro. So it's called Venezuela Aid Live. That is a play on Live Aid from Bob Geldof's hunger humanitarian programs. And we just need to remind people that the U.S. is not engaged in any humanitarian aid to Guatemala, to El Salvador, to Honduras. That's where the caravans come from that make Trump poop his pants. And we've had recent protests in Haiti over conditions there. Have you heard any elected official in the U.S. call for humanitarian aid for Haiti right now? I'm listening for it. I was surprised to see this piece at Yahoo News today saying that you can't blame socialism for the problems in Venezuela. Now, this is a major departure from the orthodoxy of the corporate media, and I give Yahoo News credit. Dion Rabouin is the reporter who wrote this. It leads, a common misconception reinforced recently by Trump is that the crisis in Venezuela is the natural result of a socialist system of government. And in simple language, they go through with the shift to try to transfer wealth from the very rich to the larger population under Hugo Chavez, and the land transfers, other efforts that were made, and showing that the precipitous drop in oil prices from $120 a barrel in 2014 to $25 a barrel last year forced Maduro to borrow money, and they're now forced to pay that back, and it puts a huge pressure on the cash flow both in and out of Venezuela. It also depresses oil proceeds because in some cases they are trading oil to pay off debt. So it goes on to make some additional points that I don't agree with, but just to run a headline saying that socialism is not the cause, that is a remarkable shift from what we see across all the media here today. In France yesterday, the Yellow Vest protests were replaced or displaced by large crowds who went public to express their opposition to anti-Semitic expression. There was a cemetery in Quatzenheim, a small town in the Alsace region, where over 80 gravestones at a Jewish cemetery were defaced, including some swastikas being painted. And I joined President Macron and all those who took to the streets in rejecting this form of expression. This is real anti-Semitism, and it is a virulent virus that has to be attacked. But when Jewish Americans and the advocates for the state of Israel here in the United States intentionally conflate criticism of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism, they undermine the entire meaning of the term and the virulence that it reflects. And so, while I deplore the actions, I am pleased at the reaction. And I also picked up a story from the Associated Press today that a group of young American Jews who are rabbinical students have been visiting West Bank sites. And they have actually been meeting with Palestinians and trying to develop what I consider to be compassion for the impact of the conflict. One of the students, Tyler Dratch, from Hebrew College in Boston, was among some 24 Jewish students planting olive trees in the Palestinian village of At Tuwani, in the southern West Bank. The only Jews that locals typically see there are either Israeli soldiers or ultra-nationalist settlers. Every day I pause for a moment to thank the people who support my work at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like Patrick Garay, Carla Mahoney, Benny Alto, and Ben Brotman. They each kick in $5, in some cases more, each month to support what I'm doing here. And I invite you to join them. All you have to do is visit peterbcollins.com. There's a menu button that displays. Click on that, then click on Become a Subscriber. You land on the sign-up page. And the options are right there, $5, $10, $20 a month. Our $50 annual subscription earns you a bonus book. The current bonus book is Dr. Justin A. Frank's Trump on the Couch. Grab them while they last at peterbcollins.com. And if you prefer to communicate via the U.S. mail and avoid PayPal, I do understand. My mailing address, Box 150, 660, San Rafael, California, 94915. Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer, has gotten a reprieve, granted a 60-day delay before he must surrender and report to prison. They said he had some serious surgery and needs to have some physical therapy, and that he needs to prepare for testimony before 3 congressional committees at the end of the month. That's been repeatedly delayed, so we'll see if it actually happens. Now, this is based on a leak to CNN, but the report is that the Mueller report will be completed as soon as next week. And, as we understand it, that secret report will be submitted to the brand new Attorney General and Trump loyalist, Bill Barr, and then Barr will submit to Congress a summary of Mueller's confidential report. What will he include? What will he leave out? Well, we can't trust him, and that's probably going to be a bit of a food fight. And meanwhile, as we're told that Mueller is wrapping up, or at least on his report, The Washington Post is trying to be helpful to Mueller. They published a lengthy article today, What We Learned About Trump World Outreach to Russia Since Mueller's Investigation Began, and most importantly, what we still don't know. So this is mostly a rehash of what you've already heard, the stuff that Rachel Maddow goes over every night and repeats to, beating it into the ground, in my opinion. But what's interesting about this piece, and I've linked to it so you can read it, is that they say what we know and what don't we know. So they actually enumerate some of the known unknowns, as our old pal Rummy, Don Rumsfeld, might say. And so we still don't understand exactly what Cohen pleaded guilty to lying Congress about, related to the Moscow Project. And that is worthy of further disclosure. We also don't know, they list here, was the Trump Tower meeting connected to Russia's interference in the campaign to help Trump win? Well, at this point, that has been treated as fact by the Washington Post and other commercial media outlets. So it's refreshing to see that they still have some questions about that. The general public doesn't. If you're a Democrat, you believe that Russia colluded with Trump, even though Mueller has never asserted that publicly. Another inference that has been made in the coverage based on leaks and anonymous sources was a comment that Trump made on July 27th of 2016, where he said, hey, Russia, if you're listening, please release the 30,000 Hillary Clinton emails. And the Post asks, did the Russians try to hack Clinton's email server in response to Trump's comment? That is a clear inference that has been drawn by many people just looking at the timelines and based on an indictment that Mueller issued last summer, asserting that on the same day that Trump made that comment, there was an effort to hack into, I think, the DNC servers, which had already been hacked back in May. Or, if you believe Bill Binney as I do, they were the subject of a leak by most likely a DNC insider. And then the third section here is currying favor with Trump. What we know is that Trump has repeatedly praised Putin, and yes, I find that really weird too. But it doesn't lead me to conclude that there was collusion between Trump and Russia that led to changing the outcome of the 2016 presidential campaign. Also, rehashing a lot of old information. A mega story in today's New York Times. It runs almost 30 pages when I printed it out. They make a strong case that Trump has obstructed justice, and not just once, but in an ongoing manner. And some of the graphics here, I think, are fascinating. They show how often Trump has attacked the special counsel, Jeff Sessions. And the Justice Department in general. They do reveal for the first time that Matthew Whitaker, when he was acting AG until last week, when he appeared before the House Judiciary Committee, he apparently lied, because he was repeatedly asked if Trump or anyone from the White House asked him to interfere in the Mueller investigation. And he had pretty well-rehearsed answers, and he may feel that he answered them narrowly enough to avoid a perjury rap. But specifically, there is the report that Trump called Whitaker and asked him to switch out the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York who was handling the Cohen case and replace the prosecutor with a guy who Trump approves of, a guy named Jeffrey Berman. Now, the problem is that Matthew Whitaker quickly discovered that Berman had recused himself because of his past ties to Trump. And so Whitaker was unable to deliver on that, and according to the Times, Trump immediately soured on Whitaker as the hero that he had installed over at the Justice Department. So I have linked to this piece, and I encourage you to read it. because I do think that while it relies on some faulty information from the Russiagate coverage, overall, it does show that Trump has, in my view, clearly obstructed justice. And this is one of the reasons why we don't need the Russia meddled and Trump colluded argument in order to impeach this guy. And we'll get to impeachment and the argument here in just a second. But Trump has responded to this by once again attacking the New York Times as the true enemy of the people. And this also shows that he is continuing to obstruct justice and to try to undermine media coverage that he finds uncomfortable. Now, speaking of impeachment, I led the podcast with this yesterday. The Democrats are content to protest Trump's power grab with the emergency decree. They're willing to investigate him. They're willing to sue him. But they're not willing to impeach him. And over at Counterpunch, and I thank our friend Carl Howard in Columbus, Ohio, for tipping me off, a man named Matthew Johnson, whom I have not heard of before, writes, "Why protest Trump when we can impeach him?" He says, "I would much rather impeach Trump than protest him. I used to be on the fence on the merits of pushing impeachment, waiting for the Mueller report, but a recent Atlantic essay I haven't read convinced the writer that beginning the impeachment process immediately is the way to go. Quote, I don't see the utility in waiting if there's no guarantee the public will ever see Mueller's findings. Moreover," Johnson writes, "the argument that the Democrats shouldn't try to impeach because they would lose is not only contrary to the goal of attempting to enforce the rule of law, but is also cowardly. This lose-first mentality has been a fixture of the Democratic strategy for far too long. The party must move beyond compromise with an uncompromising opponent if it wants to win in 2019, 2020, and beyond." He also addresses the "what about Mike Pence" argument. He says Pence is just as evil but far more boring, therefore able to conduct his machinations outside public scrutiny. But I don't buy this, he says. First, Trump has far more grassroots support than Pence, and second, the downfall of Trump would undoubtedly mire an accidental Pence presidency into an inability to effectively pursue the Trump-Pence agenda. And I agree with both of those remarks. Trump Co. is responding to a fumble by the new governor of California, Gavin Newsom. And I call it a fumble because in his State of the State speech, he implied that we're never going to complete the high-speed rail project from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and that he was settling for completing a section in the middle that would connect two towns, Modesto to Bakersfield, in California's Central Valley. Trump seized on that and said, aha, there's some money there that I could grab for my wall. And so he immediately began to attack Newsom, saying, return the federal money. And there's a total of about $3.5 billion of federal money in the project, which is so far spent somewhere less than $10 billion. And the president is back at it, tweeting, the failed fast train project in California, where the cost overruns are becoming world record setting, is hundreds of times more expensive than the desperately needed wall. And here, Trump is fumbling, because he may have legal grounds to get California to return the money if it's not going to be used for its stated purpose. But by explicitly and publicly linking it to his wall, it enables our Governor Gavin Newsom to say, it's no coincidence the administration's threat comes 24 hours after California led 16 states in challenging the president's farcical national emergency. This is clear political retribution by Trump, and we won't sit idly by. This is California's money, and we're going to fight for it. And finally today, I must declare that I am a friend of the devil. That according to the latest pronouncement from Pope Francis. He said that those who constantly criticize the Catholic Church are friends of the devil. One cannot live a whole life accusing the Church. People who did are the friends, cousins, and relatives of the devil. Well, Francis, I'm sorry. The devil is inside the Catholic Church. You preside over a corrupt fraternity of hypocritical sex fiends. Some are heterosexual, some are homosexual. But the pattern of predation, the pattern of hidden sexual activity, as the church preaches to its members that most sex is wrong or sinful, and it sets a really weak role model as it tries to lecture the members of the church on sexual behavior. And so, Your Holiness, I reject your claim, and you face a real devil in all corners of the Catholic Church. And as I mentioned yesterday, I think we are going to see a schism ultimately, and the far right wing of the clerical class will retake control and move the church in a draconian conservative direction. Thanks for listening to this daily news and comment. You're free to share it far and wide. You'll find it on YouTube, and I'm still Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling